This is just a sample of the training available at itdvds.com. To see complete training, please go to itdvds.com. Let's begin the sample. Cloud computing can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, especially if you're an end user versus an IT person. And the big reason for that is because a lot of marketing folks out there got a hold of the term cloud and used it for a lot of different things. So it became a buzzword, and that's where a lot of the confusion comes in. But as far as the IT person is concerned, which is what we're going to focus on, the cloud or cloud computing has to do with virtualization. So now we don't think of server and hardware as a one-to-one relationship. And what I mean by that is we don't think of this server, let's say, has Windows 2003 on it. We've given that server a name. We've labeled it. That server has whatever resources are in this physical hardware. So if this physical server has 2 gigs of memory, then that server has 2 gigs of memory. Because of virtual machines, we don't think of it that way. We take all of our hosts that are running our hypervisor, which could be Hyper-V, add all the resources together, and it becomes a cloud of resources or a pool of resources. So we take all the memory and add it up. Let's say there's 2 gigs in each one of these servers. We've got 12 servers. That means we have 24 gigs of memory in our cloud. If each one of these servers has 2 processors, we've got 12 of them. That means we have 24 processors in our cloud. And the reason we think of the cloud as a pool of resources is because we have a virtual machine that can run on any one of these servers. And that virtual machine can be using up all or just part of the resources on this server. So if I have a virtual machine that has 1 gig of memory and let's say 1 processor, it's only using up part of the resources in the cloud. It's not tied to this physical machine. It's not using all the resources on this physical machine. It's using up the resources in the cloud, and that's really cloud computing. So look, let's take an example here. Back before virtualization, we would have a server up here. Let's call it server 03. So server 03 is running Windows Server 2003. Because it was installed on this physical server, it had 2 gigs of memory and 2 processors. If I wanted to move this server, let's say to another data center in another state, I'd probably put this server in a box and ship it over to the other state. But now, when we're working with virtual machines in the cloud, I can actually just copy that virtual machine over the internet to another cloud, and as long as those resources that that virtual machine needs are available in that other cloud, then I can run that virtual machine. So if the memory that that virtual machine is using is available, if the processor, the disk space, the network bandwidth, as long as it's available in that other cloud, which would be another rack of maybe Hyper-V hosts, or there are other hypervisors out there like vSphere or Zen Server. Whatever the hypervisor is, as long as those resources were available to run that virtual machine, I could. It wasn't tied to a specific type of network card, for example, or a specific RAID configuration of disks. None of that mattered. We uncoupled the hardware from the operating system, which is the virtual machine. And we have mainly 2 types of clouds. There's kind of a third type as well. The first type is going to be a private cloud. Private cloud has to do with if we are in charge of the physical hardware. So all these hosts that could be running Windows Server 2012 R2 with Hyper-V, we're in charge of the physical hardware. We're plugging in the cables. We're fixing any hardware problems. But we're also running virtual machines on these hosts. So that's what makes it a cloud. But what makes it private is that we're actually in charge of the hardware and the hypervisor portion of it. And then there's a public cloud where it's run by a third party normally, and they're in charge of the physical hardware and the hypervisor portion of it. We're still running our virtual machines, but we don't really know what hardware is behind it. We don't know what type of server. We don't know how many disks, how much memory the servers have. It really doesn't matter as long as in that cloud, which is that pool of resources, there is enough resources to run our virtual machine. And then we have kind of a hybrid cloud where we have a private cloud and then we're also using a public cloud as well and kind of mixing them together. A scenario for that would be if we had our data center, our private cloud, running all of our hosts, which may be running Hyper-V, and all of our production virtual machines are on it. And then for disaster recovery, instead of setting up another rack of servers in another state or another country, we use a public cloud. So it's run by a third party, and we replicate maybe our production virtual machines out to that public cloud, and that becomes our disaster recovery site. So in that case, we have kind of a hybrid cloud where we're using both a private and a public cloud. So that's really what Hyper-V and cloud computing means to the IT person. You know, we'll hear cloud a lot as far as consumer products are concerned and services that are out there. And most likely when we do hear that, that service is running on a rack of servers on some data center that are running some type of hypervisor, could be Hyper-V, that are running virtual machines, and on those virtual machines are the applications that handle that service that consumer considers in the cloud.